Welcome everybody to another episode of In the Library of Graphic Literature with your host, Wallace Ryan.
Boo, 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 boo.
And of course, Luna.
Luna, yay! So,
we wanted to address a question that we got on our last video, which was like, how did comics save me from a life of misery and all that? So, we wanted to talk about orphans in comics. Figured we could do a whole episode on that.
We can and we will.
So what do you have up for us?
Well, we'll start. I did just a rough top 10 of some of the more obscure orphans, because everyone, of course, will say Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, yada, yada, yada. I figured we could dive deeper than that. And, of course, one of the biggest orphans out there, Tintin. And I double-checked. I had to make sure. I was like, I'm pretty sure he is an orphan, right? And
I did not know that.
And he is, as it turns out. Because when I'd read it, when I kept thinking about it, I said, geez, I can't remember him having any parents. You know, he had Snowy and the captain and all that, but that was about it, right? So great comic too, isn't it? Now this is actually a French version too.
I was going to say La Lune.
Yeah, this is the one we found in one of those libraries to give away, right? And so even though I didn't care that it was in French, it was just like kind of cool to have it in French anyway, right?
If you ever see one of those random book libraries, they're pretty cool to check out. Just around town. And drop some off sometime.
Yeah, I was going to say support them either. I'd say support them either by giving or taking. I know Sam, who's with us at the Jam, he always stops at this one on the way up this way, right?
Yes, finding characters to relate to in comics and whatever we read in media is like really important. Like we can find a bit of ourselves in it and like, you know, relate to their struggles. So
well, especially orphans too, because it's I mean it is a, like I say, a common thing, but sometimes it's done really well. Sometimes, you know, but I try to pick out the ones too that sort of made an impression on me at the time, right? Now for number 9, we actually got a tie. So it's this, and this is getting as obscure as you can get. This was a character, and I actually still have this comic over there on the spinner rack, as a matter of fact. This one was called Wood God, by the late great Keith Giffen. Yeah, and he's basically a genetically created creature. He has the humanoid, but with well, I guess he looks like a satyr, or what do they call him?
Show people.
He's one of my favorite obscure Marvel heroes, right? But and this one, of course, is his father. You don't see any mother. Well, I guess his mother is there too, and of course the local villagers come up and attack and all that, and they go into his lab and they see these germs in a vial, and they're like, oh, this is evil, smash it, and they smash it. Of course, it kills them all. Kills everyone in the town, right? But it's, and to me, they've rarely used it. And I mean, the only reason it's in here is because he appears in one of the other issues, right? And they kind of had to. It's, and still, one of my favorite orphans. And him being the father thing, well, it was a big part of his creation, right? So he was an orphan of technology. The other one was Omega the Unknown, and what is his name? James Michael. You never remember his name. Omega the Unknown. It's the Omega the Unknown and James Michael, and there's a connection between them, and you don't find out. And I'm not going to tell anyone what it is anyway. But the first issue starts out where there's a big car accident, and when he comes to and he sees his mother there, and her head is obviously just a robotic head, and he discovers that his parents, I guess, were robots. And then he goes into some sort of shock, and the story goes from there. So this was, now talk about a traumatic orphan story. This is one of the more traumatic ones like that, right? But still one of my favorites. And by the late great Steve Gerber, who did Howard the Duck. No, that was a 2-4. Eh? I couldn't decide which one, right? Now the next one is, it's a story that's in this book here. This is it's the story in particular that I picked this for the origin, was the origin of Star-Lord, who's now part of the Guardians of the Galaxy. But when I first started getting into Marvel Comics had a lot of magazines too. They call them Curtis magazines. And I actually bought this as a kid. I bought it mainly because I liked the inside front cover, which was done by Bernie Wrightson, who did the Swamp Thing. A beautiful drawing, right, I thought. But I read it, and this is, of course, a classic orphan story, and it's where there's a single mother, and she's killed by aliens, and Peter Quill is, of course, taken off to an orphanage and stuff like that, and it goes through till he ends up basically sneaking his way aboard into the role of Star-Lord, which is kind of funny, right?
And it seems like just about almost every superhero just happens to be an orphan. What's up with that, Wallace?
I don't know. It's not that us cartoonists hate our parents or anything like this. Oh, and this one has 2 orphans in it too. This is another second Star-Lord story, which was actually a classic, one of my favorites. But yeah, it's not that us cartoonists hate it. I think it's a good sort of starting point in terms of characters too, because you feel some sort of empathy for them because of what they're going through. You know, like the more famous orphans, like Superman, Batman. Well, especially Batman, one of the more famous ones, right? Especially with the origin.
And the X-Men.
Yeah. But Batman more because it's directly. I mean, it all starts with the death of his parents, right? That's where it all goes downhill for him, right? I guess so it gives you a reason. You know, this is why he dressed up in a bat costume and began crippling people out there, right? Just like a certain crime-fighting duo we all know. Now this is we were at 10, 9, 8. This is number 7. This one actually, it's one of the characters in this, and he's kind of central to it. This was a comic that it came out in a graphic novel series. Marvel in the early 80s did a set of graphic novels just called Marvel Graphic Novel. And this was one of them, Star Slammers, by Walt Simonson, who's one of my favorite artists. This guy does just incredible stuff. And this when I came upon this, I'd been a big fan of his artwork, and then the next thing he was doing this series for Marvel, or not a series, it was a one-off graphic novel, and it's about these sort of mercenaries who possess the power to join together like in a single consciousness when they're fighting or whatever, which makes them, kind of hard to fight against, right? And Ethan in particular is the one that this story seems to revolve around, right? And it even starts out where he's as a kid and he's with his parents when his parents get murdered.
So it's almost like being an orphan gives you the special ability that you don't have any strings attached in like certain places and people, that you can just go forward with your mission and
I guess so
live
too.
life
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
the universe intends it.
Yeah, I guess so. In that way, never thought about it that way, but yeah, it gives him permission to go wild or
not tethered to anything.
Yeah, well, look, even Bruce Wayne, he went away for a few years and partied down before he came back and became Batman. And they say, he was off training in some monastery. It's just like, well, in my version of Batman, he's off partying in Paris and just taking karate lessons on the side, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's good that way, right?
And it gives them almost, I guess, more relatability, and like they can like sympathize with certain characters they're trying to help in the comic.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly.
Save.
It really does bring the characters alive, and makes them speak to people, because they're, especially like that one Ethan. These were ones even when I was growing up, it was just like this is a pretty amazing story, and part of it was I didn't realize it was the orphan thing, right? It was only years later that I began to realize how many orphans were out there in comics, right? And even when I'd be teaching the class, I'd point out, no, I said, that's not because Us cartoonists hate our parents, right? Next one is an animal. Cerebus the Aardvark. As far as I know, I was thinking about it because I couldn't remember him ever having any parents, or even mentioning them that I can think of. Although I think I'd seen there was a young Cerebus for a while. But as far as this goes, at the time, to me, he was an orphan. And it would explain a lot of his behavior, right? Because he was a bit of a dictator, a bit of a barbarian. But, you know, still a fun-loving kind of guy. One of my favorite, and this too, High Society, one of my favorites.
Yes.
I got actually a hardcover version of that Dennis managed to snag for me one time, right? Now I figured I'd pick at least for the last few that we have there. What are we at? 1, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. Okay. I figure we'll go with a big one for this, and Daredevil. Because Daredevil, once again, the death of his father is really tied in to the origin. Because after his dad gets killed, he sort of begins to train and plan, and he goes after the guys who killed his dad and gets them in the end, right? But yeah, so I figured I'd pick at least one of the mainstream orphans, but not one that, you know, people would pick usually Batman, Superman, or whatever. But what about Daredevil? He's a good little orphan, right?
First one I really knew about growing up would have been Superman and Jubilee.
Okay, Jubilee, yes, right, she is, isn't she? Okay.
Yeah. Jubilee was more so, I guess, from like the show, because I watched the show more so than the comics.
Yeah, although she started first in the comics, but she was big in the show. But and it's funny because I can't remember her. It seemed after a while she just sort of faded out, or I don't know if she moved on to another team or something like that. But yeah, that's a good one. But Daredevil for me, good old Daredevil. But Jubilee
and Storm.
And Storm. Actually, that's true too. Storm. I was going to say Klaus's, but no, Klaus's father. Xavier, yeah, his parents, and Scott Summers' Cyclops. Jean Grey's parents were alive, as far as I can remember.
That's why I just included the X-Men as a whole.
yeah, a bunch of orphans, right?
Misfits.
And Wolverine. Next one, I dipped into the world of comic strips. No, it's not this character here, but for Dick Tracy, and it's I guess Dick Tracy I think might be an orphan, but Dick Tracy Jr. is definitely an orphan. They just call him Junior and all that. But he's an orphan that basically Dick Tracy takes under his wing and he adopts him, and he's renamed Dick Tracy Jr., right? So I guess so in some ways he would have been a famous orphan because he was a big part of the strip too, right? One of the major characters, right? He's in the movie we watched, right? Remember the kid that was always hanging around with him, getting in the way and all that? That's same character really, right?
Oh, okay.
And love Dick Tracy. It's good old fashioned noir comics, right? Now,
Daffy Duck does an incredible spoof of it.
Yes, I do like his. Yeah, every time that comes up on the DVDs, it's just like, oh, I gotta watch this. Right? I can never pause that one, right? And for DC, of course, I decided who was the orphan from that, but Aquaman. Dun, 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 dun. So his because his dad dies. Well, from whatever his mom, she dies in childbirth, and then he eventually discovers that he's the king of Atlantis, and and goes back home. But he's still half human. But to me, he's one of the more famous orphans he goes along with Daredevil, right? I figured I'd throw both of them a bit of a bone, right? But yeah, he's one of my favorites. And now this is this character is, well, I guess he is an orphan in some ways, but his father is still alive. It's Mr. Miracle. But the other big thing with Mr. Miracle, that I like, and that is related to orphanages, is in Mr. Miracle. Oh, here we go. I love that drawing of Darkseid. But Mr. Miracle his name is Scott Free, his real name, and he's escaped a orphanage on the devil planet Apocalypse, and he's fled to Earth to hide out, and he takes over the role of Mr. Miracle.
Okay.
And he even talks about when he meets the original Mr. Miracle, he even mentions something about being an orphan and all that. Now his mother is dead, but his father is still alive. His father is like the king, the High Father, the chief of New Genesis, right? The people who fight them. But the best part of the whole thing was the orphanage he came from. I was hoping, I thought there'd be pictures of her here. And it was one of the most interesting characters. The orphanage he was in was run by this. Here we go. Is in this one is run by this woman called Granny Goodness. How funny you should say that, but Granny Goodness. And Jesus, I mean, she looks to be like about 60 years old, but she looks like she's a stormtrooper. She's like a Nazi grandmother, right? Mm-hmm. She's about the best thing. She's evil, and oh God, even at the time it just struck me because I never seen like someone that old as a major character, right? An old woman like that. She looks, like I say, she looks like someone's grandmother who's gone evil, right? And she trains her soldiers like young boys. She even calls them like they're her boys and all that, right? And Scott or Mr. Miracle does escapes the orphanage, and she's I guess it was always a blot on her record. But the orphanage in this, to me, it was almost like something out of Dickens, right? And especially Mr. Miracle and Granny Goodness. I mean, even when you see her, it was just she's fearsome looking. It's just, even as a kid when I was reading, I was just like, oh my God, she reminds me of all the Catholic nuns that I've met, right? Because I went to a Catholic school, and they were all kind of like a little bit Granny Goodness. Some of them were really nice, but there were one or two who were kind of Granny Goodness. And the number one person on our orphan list is probably the most famous orphan of them all, Little Orphan Annie. I mean, come on, it's even in the name, right? I'm an orphan, but from at the other end. When I first started buying these books, actually, I was thinking, I'll just buy one or two of each book, each one that comes out from this company as examples of comic strips.
Get the whole set.
But yeah, but I started reading it, and it was just like, I guess I was thinking like Little Orphan Annie from the Broadway show and all that type of imaging, that it was some sort of cutesy pew, some sort of I don't know, like Shirley Temple type of character or whatever. But when I start reading it, I mean, she goes on adventures, deals with criminals, and I mean, it's a really very well written comic strip. And the characters, I mean, some of the characters are pretty grim and all that, and it's kind of a dark comic strip in some ways, right? So, I mean, even then, look at that, right?
Yeah.
So it's but definitely worth reading. To me, when I first started reading, I just read thinking, oh yeah, this is going to be fun. But by the end of the first book, which I did read the first couple of books in this series, it was just like, no wonder people love this comic.
Does she get adopted by a rich guy in it?
Yeah, she's taken under the Daddy Warbucks, right? And so he's like the rich well, I guess adopted father, right? And I mean, he takes part in a lot of the adventure stuff like that. In some ways, I think he's to blame for half the adventures, right? But yeah, but with Daddy Warbucks, that's what enables her to go from just an orphan on the street to an orphan who goes through all these kinds of adventures too, right? Because you have to have money for a lot of this, right? But definitely, I think the the king of the orphan comic art in the comic arts, even though it's a comic strip. Definitely the most famous orphan of them all, I think, right?
I believe it.
Well, I'll show people, give people a close-in look at it just before we. And the style is just very, very strange and plain, but
It's very cute too.
yeah, it's very deceptive, right? It reminds me of this British guy, Raymond Briggs, and the way he used to draw comics. It looked like almost a children's book, right? And then you get into nuclear war or something like that, right? Anyway, this was a great episode. Good idea, by the way. Thank you very much. And I guess we'll be back next week, maybe with some new books. I know I got one new book, or maybe we'll come up with another cool theme.
We'll see.
You never know.
See how it goes.
Well,
Until next time, folks.
see how the cats are outside destroying the house as we speak.
Bye.
Love you. Bye. Thanks for having us over.